Okay, I got to get back. All right. Welcome to all of our viewers and to our panelists. My name is Sharon Harris Ewing. I am the Assistant Minister at Naples United Church of Christ, and I will be moderating this panel this evening. One of my responsibilities at the church is to serve as the liaison to our Justice Committee. And last month, the committee had a presentation by a UCC pastor who answering the question, what does the Christian faith have to say about justice? And we decided that we wanted to follow that with a broader question about what do other faiths have to say about justice. So we have with us three distinguished clergy leaders in our community, and I'm going to introduce them in just 1 minute. First, I'm going to do a little bit of technical commentary. For those of you who are not familiar or are wondering about this, this is a webinar format, which means that neither I nor the panelists can see you. We know you're there, but you can see me and the three panelists, and we will be engaging, and I will be asking them some questions, and at the end there will be some time for Q&A. The way that we will do that is at the bottom of your screen or elsewhere, if it's a different kind, sometimes they're in different places, there should be a feature that says Q&A. And if you will use that to submit questions to me, then when we get to that part, I will ask them of our guests. There is also a chat feature, and I would encourage you to save that for any technical problems. We have a technical person who's watching right along with you, and if you have some difficulty, she'll be right there to try to help you. So let us begin, and let me say that it is really a privilege and an honor to introduce these people to you. I'm going to start at the top of my screen. Your screens may be different. I never know quite what other people are seeing, but first I want to introduce Imam Muhammad Nour. I hope I'm saying that right, who is the Imam from the Islamic Center of Naples. And we also have the Reverend Tony Fisher, who is the pastor at the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Greater Naples, and happens to be a neighbor of mine, very close down the road. And we have Rabbi Miller, Rabbi Adam Miller from Temple Shalom, which is also not too far from me, on Pine Ridge Road. And we are just delighted that you all are here. I made a decision. I'm not going to try to ask you or to present and tell everybody all about you, because I'm going to let you tell our viewers about yourselves. So my very first question is, please tell us a little about yourself and your congregation. What's the nature of the congregation? How long have you been here? What do you think about your community of faith is important for us to know? And I'm going to randomly start with Rabbi Miller.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Wonderful to be here. I appreciate the invitation to be with my esteemed colleagues on this panel as we have this important conversation that feels very timely as far as what do each of our faith traditions have to say about justice and its pursuit. You opened up with quite a broad question. I'm going to try not to go too far, because I think the conversation we probably want to hear more about is related to justice, and not just who we are and where we're from, but a little bit about me and where I am. So I am the senior rabbi at Temple Shalom here in Naples. Temple Shalom is almost 60 years old as a congregation. We are located on Pine Ridge Road, a little bit east of Logan. We right now have about 770, almost 800 households in our community. That's how we count them. Roughly 1,200 adults, a couple hundred children, and we're the largest and oldest Jewish community here in Southwest Florida. Our congregation is part of what's known as the Reform movement, which is on the more progressive end of the Jewish streams of belief. To give the short answer, I did a little over a year ago when I did a panel discussion, I believe with the Imam as well, we were talking about Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. I explained that the simplest explanation between Reform and Orthodox is Reform is about the spirit of the law as opposed to the letter of the law. And that idea of pursuing the spirit of the law is part of what brings us into this conversation about justice, because we're looking at our sacred text not just for the literal reading of what is it that we should be doing, but what are the values, the truth that motivate us and inspire us to be partners with God in making our world more whole and holy. And so that's kind of the starting point for us. I think you wanted just a general introduction, so we'll stop there for the moment. We'll get more into that justice conversation as we go, I'm sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to go clockwise. Reverend Fisher, if you would introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your congregation.
Sure. And again, I too am grateful to be part of this conversation with my esteemed colleagues. It is great to be with you all this evening. The Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples is a 45-year-old congregation here in Southwest Florida. I've been the minister for the congregation for the last 6.5 years. I am, before that, just newly ordained. I returned to school at the age of 58 to divinity school and went through my training. And this is my first settlement. So my experience here has been extremely positive. We're a congregation of 350 members, very close to Temple Shalom and a little bit west of there. And the congregation exists on the liberal religious spectrum, probably no longer on the Christian spectrum in terms of our understanding and beliefs. We are an ethically based tradition, also a non-creedal tradition, which means that we don't have an established set of things that we need to say we believe in order to be a member of the congregation. We are in the same boat as the congregational church in that way. We have the same roots from Calvinist New England. And so we are a covenantal tradition that we bind ourselves to each other through agreement by covenant. We choose to walk together in love and move forward in that way. So that's a sort of a brief introduction.
All right, thank you very much. And Imam Nour, tell us about yourself and the Islamic Center of Naples.
Well, thank you so much for introducing me, and thank you for having us today as the Islamic Center, representative from the Islamic Center of Naples. I think it's an honor to be with my colleagues as well. So we have seen each other before, and it's been a while because of this pandemic, and we haven't seen each other. So I hope you're all doing great. And I love this session, to be honest with you. It brings the community together, and it opens other doors just to understand each other, and for the audience, for our community members to understand different views from different backgrounds, different cultures, different religions. Well, my name is Muhammad Nour. I am actually originally from Egypt. I came to Naples, and I came to the US in June of 2016. I came to lead in the Islamic Center of Naples to be the Imam. And the word Imam means, is like pastor, something like the religious work or religious person in the community or in the center. Our center has been there for, I think, 26 years, and it's actually started 1994, but it was not in the same place that we are in right now. It was somewhere else. We moved a lot, but I was not there for sure. The place that we have right now is in County Barn Road. It's off Davis. And we've been there for 2 years. I think Rabbi Miller, he came and the grand opening, and we had the honor to have him there. And we have our brothers in the community also, and sisters who were there with us when we opened it. So it's been there for 2 years. And what we do there is just pray, worship, and talk about good things. Talk about love, talk about peace, justice, all of these things that we all love to see, love to have in our community. So again, it's a pleasure and an honor to be with you today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And thank you to each one of you. So I'm asking, and just so that our viewers know, I'm not springing these on these panelists. I let them know in advance what we were going to ask. So that, what does your faith tradition teach about justice? And where does the teaching come from? Is it sacred texts or teaching of the prophets or historical tradition? There are lots of, and maybe more than one source, obviously. But what does your faith teach about justice? And I'm going to start this time with you, Imam Nour, if you would answer that question for us.
Sure. Well, when we talk about Islam and justice, they go hand in hand. In the Quran, which is our holy book, God says you cannot be righteous enough if you're not just. So we have actually many of these texts that we have in the Quran and from the tradition of our Prophet Muhammad. So in the Islamic worldview, justice denotes placing things in the rightful place. So we place things in the rightful place, and also means like giving equal treatment to each other. Like we don't draw any distinction between any of the people because of color, because of race, because of any of these things that we all know. In fact, actually, one of the beautiful statements and the traditions that we learn from our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that 7 categories of people will be under the shelter of God on the day of judgment in the afterlife. And one of them, or the first one that he mentioned, he said, just leader, a just leader. That we have a leader who's just observing justice all the time. So it is mentioned in the text, the holy text in the Quran, so many verses. So like many verses. I don't know exactly the number of the verses that is mentioned that I talk about justice, but if you just they are so countless. And also in the tradition of the Prophet Muhammad. One of these beautiful statements that or the beautiful verses from the Quran that says, "Oh my servants, stand up for justice. Stand up for justice, even if that's against your own self. If that going to harm you, hurt you, you need to stand up for justice." The beautiful statement also from the Quran, it's from the sacred tradition of our Prophet that God says, "All my servants, I have made injustice forbidden for myself. So I have made it also forbidden for you. So do not unjust one another. Do not wrong one another." So this is also another tradition from our Prophet, that in which he conveys, or he's telling us about what God has to say about justice. Well, the importance of justice in the Quran is not like justice in Islam is not like a good manner that we have the option to follow or not. It's actually a command in the Quran. God says you need to stand up for justice. God says in the Quran that exactly, literally, he says, God says, or God commands you to stand up for justice and to be good to one another, and to maintain the ties of kinship, to be good to your relatives. So these are 3 things that he mentioned. The first thing he spoke about is what he said: he commands you to observe justice, to be just, do not unjust anyone. And then he says,
Go ahead. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
God commands justice and fair dealings. And this is in chapter number 16, verse number 90, which is beautiful. It's just like you say, God commands you to be just and to be fair to one another. All you who believe, be upright for God and be bearer of witness with justice. All you who believe, stand up for justice. And then he says in chapter number 5, or verse number 2, he says, don't let the hatred of people lead you to be unjust or to wrong them. So sometimes we don't like some people, and we just want to go and judge them, want to go and talk about them, and just unjust do anything that just to feel that we are better than them. So in the Quran or in Islam, God eliminated that from to begin with. So in Islam, equality is one of the best things, one of the great things that you can practice in Islam. In the beautiful statement of our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he says, there is no superiority for an Arab over a non-Arab, or for a non-Arab over an Arab, except by consciousness and be good, and be being just close to God. If you're closer to God, that what matters in the sight of God. So if you're not, then there's no superiority for anyone over another. We cannot say that because I'm from this country, or because this is my color, this is my my background, my tradition, I'm better than others. So this was the first sin that is mentioned in the Holy Book, in the Quran. The first sin, when the devil he disobeyed the command of God, and he said, "No, I'm better than him. I'm not gonna bow for him. I'm not gonna prostrate for him." He says, "I'm better than him." So the first thing he said, "I'm better." So that's kind of also injustice. We have also so many verses in the Quran, and we all of these things that I'm talking about, they are actually sacred texts from the Quran, which is our first source of legislation, or from the tradition of our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. God does not forbid you from doing good and being just to those who have neither fought you over your faith nor evicted you from your homes. So he's telling us we need to be just with all people, even with our foes, with your friends or your foes, also your enemies. You need to be just. And as he said, don't let the hatred lead you to be unjust. And he also commanded our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and he said, "O Muhammad, say, I believe in the scripture which God has sent out, and I am commanded to judge justly between you." So it's a commandment. It's not about something that's a good manner that we talk about. It's a commandment. You cannot actually reach the level of consciousness if you're not just. He says, be just. God says, be just. That will bring you closer to be conscious people and good people.
I
So,
thank you very, very much. I just learned a whole lot,
well,
and
thank you.
I'm gonna keep learning from you. I'm gonna get to Adam and then Tony, so we can get to the next question. But thank you. That was
Thank you.
rich. Yes, Adam. What does Judaism say about justice?
Well, your question was, where does the text come from? Is it an ancient text, a later teaching? The answer to all that is yes. It is everywhere, this concept of justice in Judaism. And like the Imam said, it's interesting. In Judaism also, it is a commandment. And we see that truly take form in the book of Deuteronomy, where the Israelites are commanded, tzedek, tzedek tirdof. Justice, justice shall you pursue. And the rabbis note that it's unusual in Torah to have two words that repeat like that, tzedek, tzedek. And that the reason that it repeats is to really put the emphasis on this commandment, that it's not just enough to go out and do just or to pursue justice. You must avidly pursue justice, really run after it, seek to do it to make the world a better place. And in Judaism, one of the terms that we hear a lot is the idea of tzedakah. And sometimes people translate it into English as charity, but that's really not what it is. Charity and tzedakah come from two very different places. Tzedakah comes from that root of tzedek, of justice. That when you do an act of tzedakah, when you do an act of giving money to someone who's in need, or of providing for an organization that's doing good work, what you're doing is you're not doing it because you pity the person or you feel bad for them. You're doing it because you see that there's an imbalance in the world, that there's a lack of justice. And by doing this action, you're hoping to bring the world back into balance. And that message of pursuing justice is something that also echoes throughout all of the prophets. The Hebrew prophets rail time and again against those who have forsaken their obligation to help those who are in need, who are caring only about themselves. So much that you have someone like Isaiah saying to the Israelites, this is not the offering that I desire, that God doesn't want you to just go and make offerings. God wants you to give to the poor. God wants you to care for the sick. God wants you to be pursuing all these things. And so that idea of justice kind of permeates throughout all of Judaism, the idea that we're trying to create balance, that we're trying to bring tzedek. Some of it resonates with the idea of everyone being created in the divine image. That comes from Genesis, that each person is created in B'Tselem Elohim. And if we're all created in the divine image, and we're all just like the divine, shouldn't we be treating each other in that way? seeing the other person as holy and sacred because they're in the divine image. Not only that, if we're in the divine image, we should be acting like God. So as God cares for Abraham after his circumcision, we should be caring for the sick. As God is there to shelter people in their time of need, we should be doing the same. As God was there to free the Israelites from their oppression in Egypt, we should be working to free those who are oppressed and bring them redemption. We're to echo God's actions in pursuing justice. And the final piece of this puzzle is another term that some might know in your audience, which is tikkun olam. The rabbis later came up with this idea of we have an obligation, this pursuit of justice, to, in their words, litaken olam b'malchut shaddai. I expect everyone to remember that right off the tip of the tongue. No, what that means is to repair the world under God's kingdom, but it's been shortened to just the idea of tikkun olam, repairing the world. And there's a beautiful story that's told by the mystics that when the world was created, the world was perfect and whole. But sadly, something happened and the world shattered, sending divine sparks of holiness all around the world. And it's now our obligation as human beings to go and do good deeds, to go and pursue justice. And each time we do so, we're collecting one more of those holy sparks. We're making the world a little more whole and holy. So in all these ways, justice is part and parcel of what it is that we believe as Jews and what it is that we feel obligated to do in our work in this world.
All right, thank you very much. Tony, to you.
Well, boy, I've been enjoying both of my colleagues and their comments and learning, as you have, Sharon. The whole idea of tikkun olam is a story that resonates very strongly with me, and that idea of the divine spark in each one of us that we are trying to collect and reunite as a whole inspires me, I think. So with that, I will say that Unitarian Universalism, historically, I should say that Unitarianism and Universalism were two separate denominations of the Christian faith that evolved in America in the late 1700s, early 1800s. So historically, for the purposes of this conversation, the Universalists were very much interested in a God that loved everybody so much, and that we should be inspired by that love and use that love as a model in our lives. The Unitarians sort of broke from the traditional Calvinist sense of having an elect group of people that would, whatever they did, they would go to heaven because they were predestined to do that. That was one of the important breaks that the Unitarians made with the standing church at that time, feeling very strongly that salvation, as we speak of it, is the result of character, about how you live your life in the world. And so from the very beginnings of this particular tradition, or this combined tradition, the idea of going out into the world and doing just work. There were very early in the establishment of the Unitarian Association, there were missions into the cities to help people who were struggling at that time. And there were many of our members were part of the abolitionist movement before the Civil War, and that has continued. We do not have within our tradition any one sacred text. We honor our Judeo-Christian background, and so the Quran and the Hebrew Bible and the New Testaments are all important work and tell us important things, give us important stories that help us model ourselves. The teachings of Jesus, I think, for me, are critical in understanding how we can be. That was one of the important distinctions in the early Unitarian movement, that Jesus was a human being, was not divine, but a more perfect human being, one that we could establish as a model for our own lives. And so again, it is the idea of inspiring each individual to live their best life. We have, I mentioned covenant before, and the idea of covenant grew out of those small village congregations in New England who didn't have a covenant, a creed, Most of them believed the same thing. They were all sort of Calvinist Puritans from Europe, but they established, before they could even establish a church, they had to establish a covenant with how will we walk with each other in the world. And that's an important sort of foundational point in Unitarian Universalism. We have in our national association our bylaws. It's part of our governance. A set of purposes and principles. They are not something that everybody knows by heart. We do refer to them quite often. There are 7 principles and 6 sources, and again, they're not creedal in any sense, but they're ethical guidelines and an understanding of the power of a plurality of sources of truth. So we believe we affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. We affirm and promote the acceptance of one another as we are, and encouragement to each other for spiritual growth within our congregations. We affirm and promote a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, meaning that each one of us is charged with finding our way in the world, and we're charged with doing that in community, which is, I think, the missing piece in some of our literature, but it certainly is very much a part of our current idea of who we are and who we can be, that idea of covenanted community, and that journeying as an individual doesn't get you that far, but journeying together in community does. We believe in the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process in our congregations and in society at large. So our congregations are the strength of our congregations is in the people. They are, in fact, the foundation of our governance. We are like a New England town meeting, in that the people within the congregation make the decisions about the congregation. They call the minister. They decide whether to associate with the larger denomination in the world. So the power rests in the congregation, and they elect members of the congregation to represent them within the governance. We believe in a goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. And for me, most importantly, we have a great respect and a belief in the interdependent web of all existence, of what we are a part. And for me, that is sort of foundational in this sense of a oneness that we are sort of like the idea of tikkun olam. We are trying to create a unity among all people, and believe very strongly in that, and that exists. We just need to recognize it. We just need to find those divine sparks and bring them together. Our language speaks of an interdependent web, and so in a very similar way. Our sources. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just want to briefly say that our sources sort of begin to bring in sort of other ways towards how we do this. So we honor our Judeo-Christian heritage, which teaches us to love our neighbor as ourselves. We believe in, we appreciate the work of science, and that's a very important piece of who we are, and trusting, but tempering science through reason and our faculties of reason. And we honor the native traditions and their connection to the earth and their awareness of the cycles of the earth and its seasons. And the words and deeds of prophetic women and men that teach us to challenge injustice with our own actions. So all those things sort of, they are the guidelines that we utilize to challenge people. And I think that's the word, because there's not a demand, it's a challenge. To live a good life is to find your way towards justice. One of our great ministers in the past was the one who sort of penned the words, the moral arc of the universe is long, but I believe it bends towards justice. That was Theodore Parker. And the Unitarians are always talking about, trying to bend that arc.
All right, and it's your turn to start. So I'm just going to follow that right up with the next question, but it's the question that will come to all of you. And that is, with very clear challenges and commands to do justice, to be just, and clearly affirmation of the equality and the oneness of humankind. How does that translate into action within the community of faith, your congregants? So what might individuals be expected to do? Or I mentioned that I'm the liaison to the Justice Committee. Do your congregations have a group of people who kind of are the leaders for your congregation in doing justice? It's kind of making that translation from this is what we believe we really need to do. So how do we go about doing that as individuals or groups within the congregation? And Tony, it's to you.
Okay, so we are structured where if there are people who are interested in doing this work, then they gather and they find a date and they get together and they start working. So we have within our organization, our congregation, a social justice committee that are active at various degrees. Within that justice committee, there are people who have different areas of interest. So within our justice committee, there are people working on women's issues, women's health issues and rights. There are folks working on LGBTQ issues and meeting about that. We have a group that is very concerned about the environment and therefore bringing both, calling our attention to places where we can be active along those lines and the things we can do as individuals and collectively. We have people working in along the lines of racial equality and in terms of what's happening right now, we have a group of people who are, highly inspired to help us as a congregation become more anti-racist. So, and we're just beginning this process this year, inspired by our national organization, not necessarily to reinvent the wheel, but to challenge each other. To think deeply about our relationship with race and to do the work, to really reflect deeply about how we feel about things, to share with that openly and learn from each other. So it's sort of the idea of within, we need to do our own work. Among, in terms of our congregation, we need to talk about how do we reflect the dominant culture and how can we change that? And beyond, how do we interact with the world beyond our walls? How do we partner with organizations doing anti-racist work on the ground here in Naples and across the country? So it's very much a grassroots kind of thing. And my preaching tends to try to push people towards this work, recognizing the different places people are in their lives and the different abilities they have, trying to find ways, as we say, different on-ramps into this work and different ways that people can contribute.
Okay, thank you. And Imam Nour, what does it look like in terms of how your individuals or congregation go about doing the justice that you spoke so eloquently?
So in Islam is a little different how to start applying or observing justice. First thing we need to realize, we need to know is that everyone has a responsibility, that we all have to share that responsibility. We have to care about others, care about our community. So in the statement, the beautiful tradition of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he said, start with yourself, change yourself first. Then we need to change the community next. So the individuals are very important to start with. When you talk about the changing, talk about it's like change does not happen. Change has to be made, and we will make it, and we make it. So that is the most important thing. You start with yourself, then you start with others. Talking about the committee member that is responsible for responsibility or for the justice in the community. Yes, we do have a committee member that receives calls, receives like problems and stuff. We get together and we talk about it, and if we can do it, we do it, because there is another commandment from the Prophet: if you ever see something wrong, you need to change it. You need to change it with whatever you can do. You can do change it with your tongue, change it with your hand, change it with your heart. At least you deny it. But we take into consideration that we cannot apply the law, because I mean, the law that the judge has to decide. So when we talk about justice, this issue has to do with the judge. If there's something that is crime committed, for example, or something, we cannot do anything about that. It's all what we can do is just advise. But when it comes to this, applying this justice, it has to be through the judge, then through the laws that we have, the country that we live in, we abide by that. So this is very important to pinpoint. The next thing, as I heard these two beautiful words, like the getting together and sadaqa, and so we have the same thing in the Quran, in our holy book, that says, take from their money a sadaqah that bring them together and educate them and purify their hearts. And then the other point, that getting together, and we respect all the prophets and messengers in Islam. If you do not believe in one prophet, you're not a Muslim. And there is one beautiful verse also that has to do with justice, that is mentioned also in chapter number 55, verse number 25. This verse says, we sent our messengers with clear signs and sent down with them the book and the measure, in order to establish justice. So we are here to establish justice as individuals and as a community, as a collective work. We need to work on that. Everyone has a responsibility, because we cannot say that we need a committee member. Yes, we do need a committee members to work on that and receive these problems and try to fix it. But the most important thing that we start, as we do with just all the speeches and stuff, we remind people that you have a responsibility. You need to be good yourself first, then your family will be good, and then the community, when they see you, they take you just as a role model. So yes, we do have a community, and we have some organizations that actually work for justice, like Care Florida is a very powerful organization that stands for justice. If anybody's wronged, they take the lead and just go ahead and fix the problem and get his right back. But there's one important point in our religion that also we need to remember. Even if you do not get your right in this life, you will get it in the afterlife. There is a verse in the Quran, in the Holy Book, that says, on the day of judgment, there is absolutely no injustice. On the day of judgment, when we get back to God, there's absolutely no injustice, no oppression. That way we feel comfortable in our hearts. Like, even if you're wronged in this life, don't worry about it. You will get your right back on the day of judgment. So that's what we have to say about having committee members, have groups who are responsible for justice.
Thank you very much. And Rabbi Miller.
Thank you. It's an interesting question. How do you take these ideas, these concepts that were so important to us, and apply them? And I think what we just heard is important, that there's different elements of national versus local pieces of the puzzle that kind of come together. So within the reform movement, for example, on a national level, we have many organizations that work towards justice issues. One example that comes to mind is the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, which is in Washington, D.C., where they do advocacy on Capitol Hill. It's actually at the Religious Action Center's offices where the civil rights bills in the 1960s were actually signed, sitting around that table, drafted and signed. They were so integral a part of the civil rights movement at that time, and they work on a national level. On a more local level, there's a lot of autonomy within congregations to decide how we want to embrace it. It's partially a reflection of the rabbi who is leading the community, the lay leadership of the congregation, and the membership itself, as far as what direction they want to be guided in and how are they going to embrace it. Within Temple Shalom, like many other synagogues and churches and mosques, I'm sure, we have committees, and we have a Tikkun Olam Council, is what we call our group, that works in the area of social action and social justice. I want to distinguish there, because there's a difference between social action, going out and feeding the hungry, or doing a Meals of Hope event, or collecting clothes for those who are in need, and doing justice work, which is more on the advocacy side of advocating for a long-term systemic change that can lead to better things down the road, and might in some ways obviate the need for some of those social action work that you are doing, but that social action work is still vital in the short term, meeting the needs of those who are facing injustice. So you have a balancing act there. Within our own congregation, we like to emphasize the fact that justice issues are something that are not every issue is going to speak to everyone. but that we believe it's important not to start with the politics side of things, not with the solutions for how do we address injustice, but rather start with our shared values. So our Tikkun Olam Council often has forums where they will pick a topic, and we'll have a forum with speakers to come and educate us about an issue or an area where we feel that there is injustice. But every one of those begins not with them talking about what they see, the speakers, but with me doing a text study and starting with a conversation about why is this a core Jewish value that we're talking about? An example that comes to mind is we did a program a couple of weeks ago on the environment and on water usage and conservation in Southwest Florida. We spent the first 10 to 15 minutes doing a text study about our sacred obligation to care for the world, that there's a value of making sure that the world remains whole and that we are the ones who are to care for it. That's what it means to have that responsibility for the world. And if we all agree that that's our value, then we can look around and say, well, gee, where is the world not being taken care of? Now, we might agree or disagree on how it is we want to see that problem addressed. But we find that if we start from a question of core religious faith values and move from there to finding problems that we identify, and from there to a conversation about what we do to solve it, it's a lot healthier and gets a lot more of us working together as opposed to starting on the solution side of things. Oh, we see this problem, let's go solve it. And it becomes a politicized, polarized conversation. So we're very cognizant of trying to make justice something that goes across boundary lines and finding areas where we can work together as opposed to dividing ourselves around this important value.
Thank you. And there was a method in my madness in terms of rotating, but I didn't really do it the best way because now I'm back to you to be the first again, but that's okay because it's a logical follow-up.
Okay.
We don't have enough time to ask all the questions that I want to ask you desperately, but I do want to save some time for Q&A. And one of the things as we were forming the Justice Committee, we talked to lots of people around the state and other places and other congregations and came away with a real sense of what is most effective is when people work together. So my question as a member of the clergy in one church and you as clergy in other congregations, what, if any, issues, programs, or actions do you see where we might work together on things that need to be addressed in Naples, Collier County, or maybe across the country? But just do you see opportunities around particular issues or maybe just around core values where we could work together? And Adam, I am going to ask you to go first.
You know, I think, Sharon, it's both a short and a long answer. I think the list is infinite on the number of potential projects that we could work together on. And I think it's because we have common interests and values relating to justice and areas that we want to address. And there's a lot of things that can be done in a way that are very constructive. You know, for example, addressing things like food insecurity in our area, addressing homelessness in our area, addressing particularly the issue of the large number of homeless students in Collier County Public Schools. There are so many issues that I think cross boundaries and that people can easily work together on. That's an important and valuable opportunity. So I think the list is potentially infinite. To me, what's beautiful though is it gives us an opportunity to come together around a shared action, but also to recognize that we might all be coming to it from a different reason or from a different understanding of where our faith tradition brings us. Clearly, I'm not the Christian scholar in this group, but I know that the word charity comes from charitas in Greek, which has a sense of pity or feeling bad about somebody else's situation. That's a different reason to act charity than tzedakah, trying to create balance and justice. Yet we wind up doing the same things. So I think there's an opportunity to not just come together and do something, but to do it in a way that you can also learn about others and appreciate and recognize here's our common ground, here's where we're different, but look, we're all doing the same thing. We're making this a better place. And just briefly, one of my favorite programs I ever created was years ago, I did a teen program in Westchester County, New York, Westchester Interfaith Teens, where we had Christian community, the Muslim community, and the Jewish community. We had 10 teams from each, and they spent 4 sessions together, going to each house of worship, learning about each other's values. And then the 4th time we got together, we went and did a food packing project together. And they had to teach their peers why it was important to them to be there helping those who were suffering from hunger. And it was so wonderful to see those students coming together, finding a common activity, but also being able to share values and create a stronger sense of community overall.
Mhm.
And we don't all have to agree. We need to learn to respect and understand where everyone else is coming from. So it served multiple purposes at once.
Thank you. And I'm just going to put in a real quick insertion there. In the circles that I'm in, we use the word charity to refer to what you called social action.
Mm.
The difference between feeding somebody and figuring out why people are hungry and doing something about that. So
Interesting.
it is interesting, but you're right. There are many, many dimensions. Reverend Fisher, how can we work together? Is there any issue that's the most important, or what opportunities do you see?
Well, I should say when I first arrived in Naples, the Hunger and Homelessness Coalition was a lot more active, I think, than it is now, and Reverend Ron Miller was one of the important folks spearheading that effort. And so we did lose a bit of that thread, and there were reasons, I think, why that happened. But I do agree with Adam that sense of food insecurity is an important one, especially now given the pandemic and how people are going to be struggling as a result of this virus. So I think that would be a wonderful area in which we could gather. And I do believe that sense of shared work and shared understanding, shared values, and to be able to come together and do the work and articulate with each other the joy of finding shared values it is and should be one of our prime efforts. We have not been wonderful, I would have to say, in Southwest Florida, at least in Collier County, in terms of establishing a strong progressive, or at least a sense of that interfaith community. And I do believe that would be something that we could certainly aim for. And I guess I do agree very strongly that that's an area of primary concern right now. I know that I have a small an ability to have to help people out in a small way financially, and I just can't help everybody that is in need. So and the resources are across the county are not quite there. I think a lot of people doing a lot of great work along those lines. We have affiliated groups that are doing mutual aid projects in terms of food and so forth, but boy, the need is really, really high right now. And so I think this would be an immediate area where we could be active together.
All right, thank you. And Imam Nour, opportunities for us to work together and any particular issue that you think is important?
Well, that's great. I mean, to start the session today with together, to share these values together and share the beautiful statements from the scriptures. I believe that all of them, they came from the same origin. Just like that, what I always say, like the scriptures, they came from the same origin and they share the same values. It's amazing. But for me, the most important thing is education. Like the first verse that was ever revealed to our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was read. We spoke about the scriptures and what the scriptures say about justice and how to care about each other. So now we need to tell people, just share our what we know with people. That's what your holy book says. You need to listen to that. If we listen to the holy book and we become like religious enough, you don't have to be perfect, because nobody's perfect. You can be religious and try to listen to these or read these verses from the scriptures, and then you put it into action. Then you become a better human being. So this is the first thing, educating people about what the scriptures say. Then they start to change the community. This number one thing. The second thing that we need to get together more. I think in Naples, we are kind of like, I don't want to say scattered, like, or everybody's is doing his own job, doing part. But we need to get together as religious leaders in the community. When people see us together, it's a big thing. It's a big thing. I mean, we have problems. We have to admit that we have problems in the street, and those problems have to do with racism. Problems have to do with poverty or something. All of these problems that the UN addressed and mentioned in their global issues and problems. We have, for us as religious leaders of the community, we have problems. We have not problems. We have solutions for these problems. We say, when we say that the Holy Book says this, we need to put that into action. That's the point. We can get together, have little small organization that work for justice, and if anything that needs us to get together or to go somewhere to solve one of these problems, we are very happy to do that. I'm talking about myself. I'm very happy to participate in that. And then, as we said, like, we're not talking only about the issue of poverty, because we have so many issues other than poverty. And poverty, I mean, this could be solved by what? By charity, by giving charity. Because, for example, in Islam, it is mandatory to give a charity. It's just like something that you have to give every year, a share from your money that you save every year. 2.5% of your money, you give it to the poor people, to those who are in need. This is something I think you have the same thing. Charity, Rabbi Miller spoke about sadaqa. We can solve also this problem by caring and sharing in the community and in the beautiful community of Naples. That's I don't want to take much time, so that's all what we can do right now.
Well, I thank all of you, and I am excited about opportunities, because interfaith connections are close to my heart. So to hear your willingness to find ways that we might work together is exciting to me. We have about 9 more minutes, and I want to invite our viewers to submit questions, and we're going to have to be really quick. If you have a particular person you want to ask, if you want to use that Q&A function, I'm just going to ask another question that was given to me while I'm waiting to see if any others pop up. And that is, given what's happening in our world, and I say with great sadness and grief, the increase in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, how I'm particularly looking to Imam Nour and Rabbi Miller, although you may have experiences of a different kind, Reverend Fisher, but how do you feel like your congregations are received within the community, and are there examples of discrimination or problems that you've encountered that we don't know anything about?
So you're talking to me, right?
We're talking to all of you.
Okay. Talking about this issue, which is discrimination, I thank God in Naples, it's a beautiful city. We don't see that much, but I mean, crazy people everywhere. You know what I'm saying? So, but the most important thing for myself and my community is just to educate them about the religion and forget about anything else. I mean, we are tired of justifying everything, just because we all the time, like, oh, Islamophobia, so talk about this, talk about killing people, so jihad, all of these things. We spoke about it in so many books, so many like lectures. It's like, I mean, it's kind of like, I don't want to get to that politics side, you know what I'm saying? So for us, for the community, for the congregation in Naples, we don't worry about that at all. You will have crazy people. You can see them, and that would happen like a few years ago, 2-3 years ago. Rabbi Miller, what happened in the temple, and we were there. You will see such stuff, but for us, for me, actually, I care about educating them how to be better people, dealing with others, how to treat others, treat friends, treat the foes, not only just to practice the religion, because our religion is not is not a spiritual religion all the way, is not a material religion all the way. It is a material religion and spiritual religion, yet we worship, yet we go to the mosque and we get together and we recite the book of God. But in the same time, we need to live our life and we work and we enjoy our life. That's it, like enjoy the given moment, that's what we say. We enjoy the given moment, then we will enjoy the afterlife. That's the point. So for our congregation, I don't see that a problem. Islamophobia, we deal with it. It's just by education. People need to educate themselves, and we need to educate ourselves, our community. Yes.
I'm glad to hear your level of comfort. I appreciate that. Rabbi Miller.
Yeah, I want to build on what the Imam said about a couple of years ago. On two different occasions, we actually had the community come together in response to hate. One was the local act of having the sign at Temple Shalom shot at and damaged, and the other was in the aftermath of what happened in Pittsburgh with the shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue. And in both instances, this community of Southwest Florida, there was a huge outpouring of care, concern, compassion, and a very clear statement that was sent of, we will not tolerate that here. That is not who we are here. So in many ways, we see the community here rise up, and that's a beautiful thing. Does that mean that there aren't smaller incidences of anti-Semitism that are out there? No. Sadly, I hear about it sometimes from students in schools of people using anti-Semitic slurs or stereotypes at being used against them, or a few other minor things. There hasn't been any major incident, which is a good thing, and I think speaks to the strength of our community. But I also think we have a lot of work to do as a whole in educating people to be just conscious of the other that's around them. And I think this goes for all of us. You know, sometimes it's very easy to feel like to slip into the majority mindset. Well, we all just kind of think this way, or we all just do this. And sometimes people don't realize in a HOA, for example, that spending lots of money on getting all sorts of Christmas decorations might feel really good and wonderful, but not everyone in the community celebrates Christmas. And is that the best use of resources, or a use of resources that's representative of all the people who live in the community? And how are they going to feel about that? It's an awareness that, yeah, it seems really wonderful to have your students decorating Christmas tree ornaments at a school classroom. It's a great arts and crafts project, but maybe not everyone has a tree. And I think those little things that there's a majority culture element. You know, I think in some ways, while there's not an official faith in America, I think we can probably agree between the three of us, Christianity is the dominant majority communal faith, so much so that we have federal holiday. Christmas is a federal holiday, which I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but I think there needs to be an awareness of not everyone is in that same boat. And I think the more we open our eyes and just be aware of it, I think it'll be good for all of us going forward. And again, I want to get back to your original question. There's no major issue here with racism or racism within the Jewish community that we experience, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be working still to make all of our community even better.
Well, I appreciate all of those reactions. I did get a couple of questions, and I'm just afraid there is not time, but I'm going to take a risk here and ask a question and ask you to say yes or no. And if you say, Sharon, I refuse, I'll say, okay. This question, do you, and this would mean to the extent that you are in a preaching role, it could be teaching too, but do you feel comfortable preaching about the systemic unjust systems that exist in all of the areas you've talked about? Or is that considered too political? So
I'll go. So we'll follow your system. I'll go quickly. I'll say yes, but yes, I will talk about the larger system, what's happening, but I always start, like I said, with the value piece of it. Mm-hmm. I think it's critical to start at a place that unites people, that brings them together before you look at larger problems that are out there, because that takes away the political aspect of it. All right. If you start from the values, it moves out.
All right. Tony.
Absolutely. I think the pulpit Unitarian Universalist pulpits are free pulpits, and each minister gets to choose what they say. I tend to lean a little bit towards the justice side and not necessarily be reticent about speaking my mind about things. And yesterday we had a service about racism, and so I spoke to the systemic nature of racism, and I think my congregation expects that of me to a degree. And so with regard to the previous question, the only concern we have in our community is that we may be a bit far out on the progressive side, and therefore may be the targets of some people who don't think the same way.
Well, and that was, I wondered about that, and that was where I'm going. Imam Nour, it is 6 o'clock, and I know we need to end. Do you want to answer that question about, do you feel comfortable about preaching and teaching about systemic injustice?
Of course, I feel comfortable teaching or preaching about these systems because it's a command from God in the Quran. It's not something that we have the option to do. He says in the Quran, chapter number 11, it says, do not support those who are oppressors. And if you do, you will be punished. Yeah. And then we have another statement and tradition from our prophet that says, support your brother, whether he is an oppressor or oppressed. You might find it weird, like oppressor or oppressed. How can we do that? So that his companions, they couldn't understand that enough. He said, how we understand how to support the oppressed person. What about the oppressor? He said, by helping him or stopping him from committing that oppression. Just try to stop him or tell him that you cannot do that. So we are actually commanded to stand up for justice no matter what. So yes, I do feel comfortable talking about these systems.
I just can't thank all three of you enough. It has been a pleasure to listen to you, to watch you. And I know that all the people who are out there unseen to us, but watching you have felt the same way. And on behalf of the Justice Committee and the entire church, thank you for your time and for your willingness to share.
Yeah, I just want to apologize for. Yeah, I just want to apologize for because I got a question, so I think we ran out of time. So, I mean, you're free to give my number to whoever wants to answer.
Oh, if you have another question. Okay. All right. Yes, there was a question that was specifically for you, and I know who that person is, and it relates to compassion in Islam, and I can forward that to you. But I do, in fairness to everybody, have to stop. I look forward to being in further conversation and to whatever kinds of interfaith things might happen in the future. And
well, thank you for bringing us together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thanks to your audience for being here.
Stay safe and well, please.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you to our viewers. There will be more programs in January. We have someone from Growing Climate Solutions talking about who suffers the most from environmental climate change. So keep looking for our next program. Thank you all, and good night.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good night, Imam.
Good night.